Hi, welcome to the show. If you'd be so kind, I'd like to ask you to close your eyes and cast your mind back to a time where you played a game that really struck a chord with you. Remember how the characters made you feel, how well the narrative might have been interwoven with the gameplay, maybe how difficult it was to step away from the game for the day, or how shamelessly proud of yourself you were when you pulled off a clutch victory. You might even recall the overflow of emotions you tried not to drown in as you sat and watched the credits. If you have that game in your mind's eye, I'd like to ask, how did time affect your experience of that title? And I don't mean the length of the game or some time-shifting mechanic. I mean, did you allow this game to be a part of your life for a weekend? A week? A month? A year? Did you binge that game and devour every savory morsel it had to offer in just a few sit-downs? Or did you pace yourself and allow the hands of time to ripen the experience? Based on what you guys had to say on Twitter, it seems like the responses here will likely be mostly an even split. And to be clear, before I start throwing obscure research and highlighter overlays at you, I don't think there was a right or wrong pace to play a game. We all have our own real-world obligations, preferences, and personalities. Some of us have jobs, some of us have school, some of us have kids, some of us have short attention spans, some of us have kids with short attention spans, and that's all well and good. But today, I want to explore the psychology behind each playstyle. How does binging a game affect our enjoyment, memory, and attachment to it? Does taking your time actually awaken a game's true potential? Will you be more nostalgic for a title if that disc's lifespan in your console runs concurrent with a larger chunk of your lifespan? And why might some people feel the need to speed up their time with a game, whereas others desperately pump the brakes in search of a longer, richer, more fulfilling journey? I'm Daryl, this is Psych of Play, you're a treasure, and today we're going to dive into the psychology of binging a game versus, we'll call it, drifting through a game. My wife and I caved on watching Game of Thrones shortly after the final season aired. The buzz was just too much to handle, and someone finally lent us their HBO login, so we promptly hopped into the story. And over the course of about 2 weeks, we binged the entire series, watching several episodes per day, and admittedly, had a great time right up until the end there. And although I remember the both of us being on the edge of our seat for that 2 weeks, I don't think I could even come close to summarizing the plot for you, even if you had me at gunpoint or threatened to play astronaut in the ocean for like the 10th fucking time today. I had a similar experience after binging the Harry Potter movies for the first time, after beating Control after just over a week, and although I hate to say it, after storming through Final Fantasy VII Remake. I remember being enchanted playing it, but boy, other than fighting a house, questioning my sexuality, wanting to give Barrett a hug, and then reaffirming my sexuality, I do not remember exactly what went down, which I find strange considering I remember quite a bit of Final Fantasy VII not Remake. The only real difference in playstyle being I played the original much slower. And so that left me wondering, how does our pace of play affect our retention of a game? Does playing a game slower over time give us a better chance of actually recalling all the details of that game? Will we remember and experience more if we give ourselves time to chew the fat and think about the game in our downtime? After all, if you play a longer game over the course of a weekend and finish it, you probably didn't give your mind much time to catch up and really take in one event before you moved on to the next. In theory, if you immediately hop into part 2 of Nier Automata, you may not retain or make deeper connections to some of the juicy details from 9S's perspective, as well as you would have had you taken a break and given your mind time to speculate on what you just saw. And according to the spacing effect, this is kind of how it works. A ton of research over the past century has demonstrated that when it comes to learning, the temporal distribution of our study time, or in other words, the space and time between when we learn things, has a significant effect on our learning and retention. Essentially, we tend to remember more when there are gaps between information. If it's all lumped together, we are less likely to store it to long-term memory. Which is why cramming right before an exam might help you pass that exam, but also why you'll more than likely have forgotten all of it by the final or years later when you're drowning in student debt. But the time in between gives our minds a chance to speculate, to theorize, to chew on, to elaborate, think about, dream about, and otherwise get excited about the next chunk of information. I talked about this a little bit in the studying video from a while back, but the spacing gives us a chance to do something called elaborative encoding. When you only have so much information to work with, a small slice of the map, a tiny dose of the plot, and time to chew on that information, it gives your mind an unfinished piece of the puzzle that is much easier to elaborate on and connect to other thoughts. By thinking about that part of the game outside the context of the game, your brain begins to connect the characters, the music, the events, and other little details that make it what it is to happenings and settings in your everyday life. When you put down the sticks, your mind can catch up and make real-world associations. And research supports that when memories are elaborated like this, they decay much slower and make a much cozier home in your long-term memory. Nostalgia is more than just fond memories, it's repeatedly elaborated memories. All the time you spent merely thinking about Pokemon in class growing up is likely why booting up the old Game Boy takes you back to those days so well. It's why A Link to the Past reminds you of that kid from down the block who used to come over and play it with you, and why hearing reminds you of summers spent wandering Blockbuster or whatever was happening in your life when you played insert game here all the time. Now, it should certainly be noted that binging a game does not mean it'll be erased from your memory forever when you finish it. You've probably realized that on your own, but I do want to be clear. Here, I'll even hit you with some research that'll clarify this a bit more. In the first real formal study of its kind, a 2017 paper published in First Monday tested the effects of binging a show in one day versus watching daily versus watching weekly. Participants were split evenly into 3 groups, where they would watch a show in one of these 3 ways. As you might expect, the all-in-one-day bingers had the best memory of the show's events one day after finishing it, even over the weekly watcher scores, which is why, again, cramming often does get the job done for that exam. But after 140 days had passed, well, on average they only remembered about half of what they remembered before. The weekly watcher's memory was significantly better. So the next few days after you binge play a game, you're likely on a high and are overwhelmed with thoughts about your time with it and what took place. But a few months later? A year? Well, no, probably not. Which, to be fair, is also true of playing or watching something slowly. After all, although these differences in memory are statistically significant, they are by no means large. So if you binge, again, you aren't going to get a speeding ticket that has to be paid with amnesia, but if you play slower, you are likely to remember a good bit more of what happened. And if remembering more of a game you've played is something you'd like, well then pump the brakes there, Speed Racer. And if not, well the game must have been Balan Wonderland. For the next segment of this month's episode of Daryl Asks Dumb Questions and then Makes Them Sound Important, we should talk about how time affects enjoyment of said game. I remember vividly the events of Evangelion. It didn't make me hate myself less for having watched them. So how does drifting versus binging come into play for thinking, yeah, I'm glad I played that, when you finish the game? Luckily, this same 2017 study also took the time to ask participants how they felt after they finished the show, and sure enough, once again, bingers did report enjoying the show less on average than the drifters. It should be noted though, as the researchers point out, that this could have more to do with the fact that bingers watch the show in the lab and not in the comfort of their own homes. To be consistent, maintain one independent variable, and purely test the watching schedule, it sort of had to be done this way, but sitting in an unfamiliar place for several hours likely didn't make for a lovely Sunday afternoon. Had they watched from their home, their enjoyment might have gone up, so take these results as you will. But what I found interesting was that the daily watchers who only had to sit down for one episode actually reported enjoying it more than the weekly watchers. Which brings me to my next point. If you identify as more of a binger, do you like checklists? Do you like checking things off your checklist? Have you ever felt compelled to finish a game simply because you wanted to get it off of your backlog? If so, you're gonna like this part. Imagine that I have a coffee shop. You come in and buy 2 coffees, one for yourself and one for you. You really like coffee in this example. And then imagine I give you one of those little reward cards where each coffee you buy gets you a hole punch, and by the 10th one, you get a free coffee. Hoping you'll come back, I hand over the unpunched card, you smile, and then go drink your coffees. Now, Had I instead handed you a reward card that needed 12 hole punches, but 2 were already punched out for the coffees you bought today, do you reckon you'd be more willing to come back to my shop? Think about it for a second. You're probably thinking, it's still 10 punches either way, so what the hell difference does it make? Or maybe you're leaning one way or the other. According to a 2006 study, people complete the already started 12-point card much faster on average than the unpunched 10-point card. In both cases, you're unassing the money for 10 coffees, but for the dozen card, there is an illusion of progress towards the goal. You already have 2, man. And in this study, they also found that participants using real cafe reward programs just like this purchase coffee a lot more often the closer they are to earning a free coffee. What we're talking about here is the goal gradient hypothesis, which essentially states that as people approach completing a goal, they become more and more enticed and more likely to complete that goal. If we get started on something, it's harder to walk away, which is why you might find yourself needing to get back to that game you had to stop playing, since sleep is a necessary human function. And if you've ever found yourself thinking about that game at work and how much you can't wait to play it when you get home, it's probably Guilty Gear if you're me, and it's probably another great game if it's you. But it's not just the game's appeal that's drawing you back in. The goal gradient hypothesis makes progress in the game more enticing, and the Zeigarnik effect keeps it on your mind. I covered this in detail in an older video, but essentially the Zeigarnik effect suggests that leaving something undone will cause you to remember it better than something else you've completed. Its unfinished state leaves it as a loose end in your mind, which is why you might feel an itch to get back to that game you haven't finished yet, and why checklists are so damn satisfying. It's why knocking down your backlog is so damn satisfying. Even if the game or its ending isn't great, and your binging session kinda leaves you empty, the urge to complete something might be more than enough to keep you coming back until the job is done. If you don't believe me, just think about how far you'll go for a PNG image. And this is why, personally, I think the daily viewers in the binging study experienced the most enjoyment of the 3 groups. With the intervals being that small, they got the best of drifting and binging. They had a break between episodes to process what had happened and elaborate on the content, but the breaks were small enough to keep them wholly invested and keep itching that scratch from the unholy polymerization of the goal gradient hypothesis, the Zeigarnik effect, and checklist dopamine. This is 100% just my educated guess based on the research here, but I think it makes a lot of sense, and I hope it does to you too. So maybe the takeaway here is simply to find a nice balance for your optimum enjoyment of a game. If you want the research-based, pace-playing meta, playing a little every day might be the way to go, but I know for a fact that some people just enjoy drifting. Some have no qualms about scarfing down a game in a weekend, and that's beautiful, It's your time, spend it how you like. I did see a good handful of comments on Twitter saying that folks will often pump the brakes when the game is getting close to finishing, which is diametrically opposed to the goal gradient hypothesis, which I think is fascinating because I know I've certainly done that. We could touch on how parasocial relationships with the game's characters make saying goodbye extremely tough, but that video has already been made, and I think there's definitely something to say about the genre of the game. If you're practicing combos or playing like an MMO, you might never stop playing the game. Genre is definitely a factor here, but let's have that conversation in the comments section. Which is code for Daryl is tired and this video is long enough as it is. If you're a drifter and the journey you took in-game spanned over several chapters of your real-life journey, of course it's hard to see that come to a close. But I think what makes time such a special ingredient during our experience with the title is how it allows our minds to interweave the game and its characters into our lives and our memories of our lives. Maybe you were going through some tough times when you were playing Persona. Maybe some of your happiest days were bookended by Ocarina of Time sessions. Maybe for a period of time it felt like Red Dead Redemption was your only friend, or where Hollow Knight was your only way to find some peace. I'm a drifter, always have been, probably always will be, and although I have both binged games and had a tremendous time binging games in the past, for me, I usually prefer the leisurely stroll over the desperate race to the finish. And whether you're like me and you'd rather take the scenic route, or if you quickly indulge in all a game has to offer in one swift go with a smile on your face because tomorrow is never guaranteed, time is a valuable resource, and you're only going to get so much of it. so spend it wisely. Another month and another Psych of play in the books. Thank you so very much for watching, and I hope that you got something out of this one. I have a lot of weird and hopefully interesting video ideas coming down the road. This just happened to be the one that all of my wonderful friends over on Patreon voted on to be made next. If you'd like to join the ranks of these fellow drifters and bingers, get access to exclusive live commentaries with me on old videos, early access, and be a part of deciding what I make next, definitely go support the channel on Patreon. A hearty thank you to this month's featured patrons: Jonas Latza, Dustin Robbins, Mary, Marius Sander, Parker Wald, Ton Ribo, Franklin Sousa, and Biltone Mioam. Thank you again for being here. Let me know if you're a binger or a drifter in the comments. Like the video, share the video, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter because my self-esteem is fragile. Take care, everyone. See you next time, and have yourself a damn good one.
I was just looking for the sports channel, Gary.